Okay, I'm just starting the stream here. Doesn't look like anyone has joined yet. We're going to do a demo here today of pretty much just a scene composition similar to the assignment for this week. I was looking through my Pinterest board here for some possibilities. This is the one we used for the assignment from the Desperados game. And the virtue of this photo, or sorry, this illustration that's kind of nice is, let me see, will this actually bring up? Okay, that's a little better. There we go. Is that this is sort of almost an orthographic view of the environment. So it forces us to imagine ourselves in the environment. It also gives us a lot of visual elements to play with, but it doesn't suggest perspective from the player's point of view, really. So it kind of makes us go through the motions of imagining us in the 3D space from a first-person or third-person player perspective camera. And it allows us to pick out elements like a lot of people use these towers and this bridge. A lot of people use like these cabins. A lot of times the sort of walkways along the canyon walls were used, things like that. The river was commonly used a lot too. So it, yeah, it all kind of gives us a lot to work with. Apologies for the noise in the background. My neighbors have a little kid in the hall at the moment. I don't know what's going on there. So yeah, I'm going to yeah, that's really distracting. Sorry about that. All right, I'm going to work a little bit and try to build a composition. And hopefully they get that under control soon, because that's really annoying. Okay, so I'm going to work really simply the way I usually do with prototypes. And let's see, terrain. Okay, so we're going to establish a focal point. I'm just, right now I have the standard template map from the course open. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to use the standard template map, but I will just move my cowboy out here. One of the things I brought up a lot in the course, or I should say a lot in the reviews, was, and I'm going to refer back to my Pinterest board here, was a lot of times the people get a little bit distracted by color sometimes. And okay, someone just joined us. Looks like Ryan just joined us. Thanks for joining, Ryan. Luckily, you came in right after, I guess, after my neighbors just got their little kid under control in the hallway, so that's good. Yeah, I was just, I'm going to do a demo here today to build out a composition. I wasn't sure yet which composition I wanted to try to build. I'll probably just go with the same concept art that was used in the course, the Desperados concept art, some combination of these two here. I had other ideas. The nice thing about I was saying before you arrived, the nice thing about the image that Amelia provided was it gives us a lot of interesting elements to use, but the images themselves that they're present in they're composed from like an orthographic almost perspective, or at least a very high level perspective, not like a first or third person camera. So it forces us to imagine what these things look like from the perspective of where the player stands with a first or third person camera, without influencing that design really that much. I had some other ideas that would be more difficult. I don't know if I feel like tackling them today. I probably should just go straight ahead. I mean, you could If you wanted to do another exercise, you could do typical like RPG style maps where they're top down. They force you to imagine things even more. That's not really helpful, is it? That will open the way I think it will. Oh, it's from someone else's Pinterest board. Pinterest linking to Google, linking to Pinterest. Anyway, so I'll just go back to here. But yeah, this forces us to imagine even more so like what things look like from the first person player perspective. I would wager a good amount of money that if you just converted this this layout just verbatim into a first or third person kind of adventure game, it wouldn't work very well compositionally. It's just a guess. Some things might. And now that I look at it, yeah, like a few things might work okay. Like this looks like a giant citadel in the center. Boy, I'm going to try to open this in a new tab because there we go. That's how we do. Yeah. Some things might work. Like say you wanted this this citadel to be your focus. I guess you'd have to imagine what's outside these castle or this sort of fortified walls. If you want, if this is the main entrance up to the citadel. But once you're inside this sort of walled town, it gets a little weird. Frankly, like, yeah, like honestly, I can't even really vouch for this layout. For instance, like if you're in here in a sort of like, I don't know what this is. This might be a marketplace or something like. But if you're standing here and you're looking out this way, you're in a way it's weird because you're looking at like the back of this castle, which is strange. In fact, if you're anywhere in any of these other settlements, you'd be looking at the back of this castle, which is like not, given how prominent and important this seems, that seems a little weird to me personally. I think to make it more interesting, I'd probably move, I'd probably relocate just for my taste. And I realized there could be parts of this game I don't realize, but if I'm just thinking about this from our like first or third person perspective, kind of compositional goals, I would move this entire large citadel like kind of to the rear of everything here. And I would, yeah, I would switch. So all this stuff here is kind of to the sides and to the front of this large castle. And I'd have this main road twisting through all this other stuff here. In fact, maybe I will try that. Maybe I'll play a little bit and I'll see if I can build a static composition, kind of like we did in the assignment. And I'll see if I can make something like this work where there's sort of a citadel in the distance. To that end, I'm going to use, I'm going to stick to some pretty basic shapes. In fact, I think I'm just going to go with the gray cube, because one of the other things I tried to stress in some of the assignment reviews was, forgive me for a moment, I'm going to go back to this board. I tried to stress how important like not getting distracted by color is important. That's why a lot of times like blockouts are sometimes also called gray block, because usually they stick with one color. You don't get confused by worrying too much about the colors in your scene. I know like Amelia uses slight bits of color in her blockouts in the lecture videos, but a lot of times gray will do just fine. Like right here, I show this image a lot, but that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Put an image in new tab. There we go. Not link. Yeah, this composition here, like when the concept artist did this, they started with the most basic of shapes and the most basic of values, really, with zero color. And they established like a nice framing of these, the central focal element being more or less the space generated between these two kind of sentry rocks here in the middle. So they framed it really nicely by this really large, massive dark shape on the right here. Like you don't, at this stage when they do the block, and they don't even know what this is. Over here on the left, they block in some more rocks. They block in like kind of a foreground element of this this raised bit of terrain there. in the distance, they use another framing element of whatever these large shapes are back here. I think these probably become a little less important as they develop the scene. But then they go and they add more details. Suddenly you see details in the rocks, and more details in the rocks here, and they sort of develop what's over here a little bit on the left. But it's still the really harsh values on the tips of these rocks really like drive home that this is the focal point. And they use this thing called the rule of thirds, which I also brought up a little bit in the lecture, which is a lot of times compositions use, yeah, I brought up this one sometimes too. I did it again at the link. I want to bring up the image. There we go. So yeah, this uses the rule of thirds also in this sort of architectural rendering, where the focal point is, it seems more or less fixed on the dividing line between the right and middle thirds, and yeah, and then the convergent points of the vanishing point kind of, and the convergence of all these lines of perspective, they kind of converge over here, and they don't tend to center compositions. This rule of thirds tends to be useful to offset the focal point a little bit, and that offset naturally, I think it creates kind of an emotional response in viewers, and it definitely it helps draw more attention to it by virtue of it not being centered. I think it gives more chance for like long lines like this to draw, to be guiding lines to draw your attention that way. I'm sorry, so Ryan, you'd asked, or you made a point here, the main building, and I'm thinking you're talking about what I was showing here, yeah. The main building reminds me of the Blue Mosque. Depending on where you are in the city, it's mostly viewed from side back, but the symmetry makes it still hold that prominence. Yeah, it's more, I feel like a lot of times there are rules in architecture and in city planning, in even in park planning, where it makes sense from a real world perspective, but I feel like in games we have to often exaggerate things a lot to make them work in the same way. If we just took kind of basic plans of things, I should say it doesn't matter in all cases. In an open world game, the rules get kind of different to some extent. Like in the Spider-Man game from Insomniac recently, I mean, they more or less had to build a somewhat reduced but somewhat accurate version of New York City. But the way that game works, it doesn't really matter. I think I'm thinking more when the goals of your player progression through the levels are based more on like a feeling of forward momentum. Like definitely an Uncharted game, which is a lot of the impetus, a lot of the motivation for a lot of the assignments in this course. You definitely need to think of how the player is moving forward and plan for that a lot more. That's why when I brought this up, I felt like this would work okay, maybe more so if there was a lot of like circular movement through the space, like a lot of maybe this was kind of, I don't want to say an open world, but it was like an open level where we let you wander about, as it were. But so many times I feel like if you emerged from certain places in this environment, you wouldn't really get a nice perspective. Some of them you would. This one here is actually much more interesting to me, this triangle. I feel like when you exit out of any of these buildings, you have this nice view of another building, which is kind of cool. That would actually, I could actually make that work more easily than I could like the view of this thing here. Yeah. It's almost like I wish, well, one way you could do this, I guess a little bit, like I guess this looks like another kind of fairly decent entrance into the building. I don't know if I'd make, it looks like, for instance, you can't tell by looking at this illustration if there's many lines of sight blockers besides these buildings. As far as I can tell, like these trees would do a bit maybe of line of sight blocking, but it looks like for all intents and purposes, like this is a flat ground. I can't really see any kind of height map going on here. If this were on a raised plateau, it might work better. and also if there were like almost like mini walls blocking off, like say this was a district, and this is something we'll talk about in an assignment coming up soon. If this were a district and you didn't really have a straight view from this district into here, that might work a little better. Yeah, so anyway, I think I did all the sort of covering all the basics I want to do before I started messing around here. But yeah, maybe I will work on, I'll see if I can do something here where there's kind of this citadel in the middle of kind of a walled town or something like that. See if we can make that interesting. Uh, maybe it's sort of the view as if you just entered the walled town, and maybe I'll create kind of a progression into space of some of these buildings in the town, these other structures, but maybe giving this the focal point and the prominence that I want it to have. See if I can achieve that just in a really quick, simple block out. But yeah, again, like the reason I brought up the image of the rocks here was just I kind of like, for the sake of a demo that lasts maybe like an hour, right? Which if you want to quickly achieve your layout, you should really just think in terms of the shapes. Don't think about too much what they are. If you want to establish them as a building versus a rock, give them the most basic indications of that, more for your own sanity really than anyone else's. And then you can go back in and add detail where you want to draw attention from the player's eyes, because that's one of the factors discussed in the course, was definitely about how detail used judiciously can really just draw your eye where you want the player to have it. So okay, so let's see. I'm going to go back to this image. I'm going to pull it off onto my other monitor here. If you want, what I can do is, I don't know if you have a link to my Pinterest page, but you could, I guess if you want to follow along, let's see, can I link to a Pinterest? Copy link address, okay. So I just pasted the link address in the chat. So if you want to like look at what I'm looking at while I'm working, I guess you can do that. Okay, so there it is. This is the player perspective. We'll start with just a platform for maybe where the player enters the city. Sometimes what I like to do too is like, I'm just going to sort of draw with visual, like 3D lines here. So I'm going to build a lot of long, almost like roads that draw my eye upwards here. And I'm probably going to exaggerate some of the height perspectives because I think that's interesting. Let me move this forward a little bit. Okay, just want to make sure nothing's getting in my way here. Okay, so this is our kind of starting road. And a lot of people use this to good effect, but sometimes starting the character on kind of a bit of a somewhat raised perspective means it gives us more opportunity to draw things, as it were, in the lower part of the image, versus us standing on the low ground, everything's up above us. It's just a nice way to give us more screen space to draw things. Let's see if I can make this kind of interesting here. Okay, so let me see. First, I'll start off with a representation of the kind of the citadel thing in the distance. So let's see if I zoom way out, get a sense of scale here. See how big we want this to be. I'll scale this way up. And we'll give it some interesting sort of shape detail, not really detail, maybe just shape detail. And again, I'm working in my usual way here. Everybody works different in this course and in a job as well. I mean, my way is usually just resizing a lot of primitives. That's like my favorite way to work. Sometimes it's different depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't mind working with like kits that are made by the level artists for the level designers to snap together. That's okay too. But for the sake here, I'm just going to stick with sort of primitives, really. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'll do my usual trick of grouping these guys with just empty game object. And we'll drag these cubes into there so I can play around and have my one draggable game object. And I'll go back to here so I can see this from a distance now. Okay, that's a little bit weird. Okay. Maybe scale this up a bit. I thought it might do that. Let's see. I wonder if it will let me locally scale. Probably not. Nope. Okay. That's fine too then. I'm just adding detail here to instantly make this the focal point. And I realize this is, now that I start building this, I am going for a bit of an obvious choice. I should say that. I should be upfront about that. Like you might not always, like you might not be able to build like a big giant tower or something like that. It's obviously prominent in your level, right? Like you might need to do something that's a little more subtle, I guess. That's also a possibility. But still, I'm gonna try to, in this demo, I'm gonna try to accentuate the ways we can still draw attention to this thing. Oh, wow, did I add this guy to there? I did. Did not mean to do that. Okay. I thought, it's funny, I thought these were also in the Citadel object, but they were not. Is that all of them? Okay, that's all of them. So let's see, maybe I can turn this a little. Also, if I'm working with the rule of thirds, if my character's view is like straight ahead, like that, this would not be following the rule of thirds. It's sort of like directly ahead of me, which is not great. So I'm going to try to place it kind of off here. Actually, I think given we're using the third person view, and it sort of implies, it's a little weird, but when the player runs forward, their gun's on the right, so maybe that means we want to actually position this thing like on the right side of the composition. So perhaps what I'll do instead is make that global. I'll try to move this off here and also rotate it like this. So it's a little more interesting to look at from that perspective. I think it is already a little bit more interesting. So I'll raise it up a little too. I'll try to do it like that. Okay. Hello, Denis. Thanks for joining us. I'm just building out a composition here based on this link in the forums. I'm not sure if like when someone joins, I mean, I assume they have the history of the chat, but I should ask you because you just joined now. Denis, do you see the history of the chat, or do you just see the chat as it started from where you came in? Because I never knew the answer to this. It just never came up before. Like what you should see is you should see a comment from Ryan about the Blue Mosque, and you should see a link from me to a Pinterest page. I'm just sure if you do. I'm not sure if you see that though. If not, I'll repaste the link. I can just do that. That wouldn't be so hard. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do now also is the lighting is a little bit, we can easily play with the lighting on a real basic scale. If you grab the, you don't see the last messages. Okay. That's good to know. I'm going to show, this is the link to the Pinterest page. Yeah, I'm building something out here that's, it's based on a top-down view from like an RPG style map. Where there's kind of a walled town or city, and there's a large citadel dominant structure in it. So I'm trying to sort of um, take some of the elements, the other structures I see in this top-down map, and sort of build a composition, as I think it would work better from like a first or third person perspective game. That's the quick rundown on what I'm trying to do. Um, so yeah, so I was just saying you can try rotating. If you don't like how the values are looking in your scene, you can try rotating the directional light a little bit. And sometimes it helps you accentuate things. Once you build your composition, you might find that some things are getting washed out because the lighting's a little weird. But I'm doing just total gray block building right now because I feel like it helps. It helps keeps things really simple at the start of building everything out. Okay, so if this is that's our building here. I'm going to start thinking about thinking early about guiding lines. So some of the first guiding lines I'm going to try to build are angled like this. So these kind of start to form lines like this that are pointing upwards at this structure here. That's my goal anyway. This is just me riffing on some really basic shapes. I don't really know what this structure should ultimately look like, but already like things are looking a little dark. I might have to play with this a little more to get the exact kind of feeling I want. This is my 10-minute fantasy castle thing. So let's see, I might, I was going to go with non-blocks, but I think I'll keep it simple and go with blocks. Okay, so let's see the Citadel. Maybe I'll move it back a little. Give me a little more room to work here. As far as a framing element goes, a lot of times when you look at some paintings, I'm going to go back to Pinterest for a second. When they're composing a scene, you'll see when I talked about framing elements before, like here in this image, the way that they put this really large shape, and this is like pretty much in the foreground right here. I think by the time we get up here, yeah, it's still in the foreground. So this is a nice framing element. So if you can think of something like this, it's a common tactic to help create a sense of spatial depth, to have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, a distant ground kind of. If I can find an example, here's an illustration here. And again, I'm thinking these as 2D pieces of art. This is a pretty cool German painting. If I go to this tab, no, I keep doing that. I'm sorry. I keep meaning to go open image and new tab. Yeah, let me zoom out. Yeah, so like right here, there's this great recession into space through the train tracks, but also this really, this dark figure in the foreground here with this railing creates a really nice like framing element on the left. Even this sort of, I guess, track sign mechanism up here, like it creates this dark shape on the left. Also, if we go to, I have a lot of other landscape paintings. I show this one a lot. Open image in new tab. Okay. Yeah, right here, this is another great example. In the foreground, not only do they place these figures, but if you look this this whole rock outcropping up to this overgrown ruins of a tower, it creates this whole nice dark shape here on the left that helps frame the illuminated area right here in the middle ground, which is the focal point. It's the focal point of the geometry anyway. And then we also get nice guiding lines here, like the silhouetted aqueduct that runs across the river. Like it sort of points from the left to the right over in this direction. Like that's working really well. But yeah, that's another thing we can do. So I'm going to try to do something like this. I find a lot of times, even like when a lot of student assignments have been turned in for the course, a lot of times if I go in during a review, I can just quickly throw in something right to the side of the player, like right in front of their camera, but off to the side. And it instantly like helps like focus things a little bit better by, it removes a lot of unnecessary visual noise we might not want. Like think about if this wasn't here, you might get suddenly the noise of like even more of these rocks, like in the middle ground, like the riverbed, you'd see the river, you'd see like maybe more of the other side of the shore that looks like this, but it would be over here, but it'd be a lot busier than just like when you squint at this, a simple dark shape. And it would compete visually with this over here to have all this extra noise that would be here if it were not obscured by this large dark shape. I might have another example. Here's another one. This is, yeah, 1913, waterfall in Yosemite. Like this is one of the Hudson River artists. I don't know what my problem is. I can't seem to remember this. There we go. Yeah, even here, it's used a little bit on the left-hand side of the composition. Like if you squint at this composition, it helps you see the values of light and dark really well. And you can suddenly see this really dark shape put here on the left, and it pushes your eye away from it towards the center of the composition where it's more interesting. Maybe one more example, or no, maybe not. Yeah, let's see. I guess this does it a little bit as well. This is the same school of artists. Yeah, we get really dark shapes on the left and right, actually. They really help draw attention toward the middle, which is nice. Okay, I'll stop going on about that now. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Let me get back to my art, my concept art. Sorry, I opened too many tabs. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna do that a little bit as well. I think what I'll do is I will grab, oh, that's the MA version. Okay, I'll grab, in fact, I think what I'll do is I'll grab him, and just to accentuate that darkness, because a lot of times it'll be done through lighting, and the art team might even do it, but if you really want to try to sell your vision, you might want to grab, you might want to sort of start to establish those colors better on your own. Let's see if I can find a dark color somewhere here. That's not it. I'm just going to kind of going through all my colors. Actually, you know what? I just realized an easier way to do it. Like I do have ProBuilder installed. I know like only a few of you use this at the moment. It's pretty nice. It can be useful. So let me see, I'll do new shape. It starts off with just a cube, but you can build a lot of different shapes. And I'll just build this. And this is using, it starts off with the default material ProBuilder default, which is just a white, I think. And it has its own kind of grid on it by default, which is different from the auto grid that Amelia gave us for the course. But one of the nice things about this, I'm actually just going to put the auto grid shader on it from Asset CGMA Materials Auto Grid. I'm going to put that material on it. And then I just think it helps keep consistency anyway across the block out, so that you can see scale easily and you're not confused by different materials. But anyway, the nice thing about this, of course, is you can do a vertex color on it real easily. So if I want a dark color, I can just pop in one of these colors. And you can also, if you want your own custom color, which again, you can use color to help draw attention in a block out. But in my experience, most blockouts by level designers are just in flat gray. But feel free to experiment on your own if you're comfortable with color. But you can totally choose your own color here if you want to. This is just if you aren't familiar with this. But this gives us a standard 1 meter block defaults. Of course, you can scale these just like the FBX meshes that we're using, like just as well, or you can literally grab, you can do much more complicated editing and like actually grab the vertexes as well. But I do just fine. I do just fine pretty much like duplicating and reconfiguring, just the existing meshes. But if you want, you can get really much more complicated with this. You can even grab surfaces and you can extrude them like so. You can start building much more complicated things if you want to. But anyway, I'm just going to use the cube for now. The reason I'm using the cube is, let me go back to just image or standard object manipulation. We're going to try to put this in the foreground here. So if we figure our character view is kind of here, then we could kind of place this here a little bit. There we go. And let me just shrink it a little bit, sorry. Oh, I thought I duplicated that. I'm sorry. I can duplicate it, can I? Just like, there we go, yeah. Wow, Unity didn't like that, that's funny. But it let me do it, so okay, that's good. And I'll just add a little bit of detail here. Not too much. And if I go to, I'll do, we'll call this like foreground tower. Or maybe, let's call it framing tower, because that's what we are kind of using it for. We'll drag it into that. Now we can just move it around as we wish. Although, well, you can tell my origin's a little funky here, unfortunately, because I didn't build it. I didn't build it like rotated on the grid so much. But still, I think when we look at it, if our composition is kind of like that, it helps sort of frame the left-hand side of the image a little bit, so that now we're not distracted by too much stuff over here. And actually, these little jutting things I added here, I tried to add them to look like little pointers that are pointing off into the distance. Just a little bit of surface detail to help try to establish that. Okay, so now I'm going to try to work a little bit with some more progression into space a little bit here. And let's see if I duplicate my road. I'm going to try to have this road lead off into the distance a little here. I have an example, like a real simple example that works really nicely. Sometimes you'll see a lot of concept art that does some really simple stuff like this, like with using roads as things like, it's just kind of these like vast walkways they're almost like cartoony in how simple they are. But here's a good example. This one right here. Yeah, like right here, this one does. Yeah, it totally does this. Like this is the most simple of shapes being used to create some guiding lines. And the guiding lines here, it's literally like it couldn't be more simple. There's no, I mean, this artist has the luxury of painting whatever they want purely from a compositional standpoint. But you should also try to think this way as well. Like start from this purely compositional standpoint when you're building your scene, and think about what you want to show the player in the simplest things. And then when you add stuff to it, maybe have a screenshot of your first basic pass where you established all the really basic strong things you liked, and ask yourself if your newer version with more things added maybe had to build houses off on the sides of this rock road here, which is obviously very unrealistic and high fantasy. Ask yourself, is it competing too much with it? If so, how do I change it to reestablish the dominance of like this walkway up here? Just something to think of. And also, like I said, this has color, but it's pretty much, it's almost monochromatic. Like there's like some greens and blues and that's it. But it's kind of a gray image, really. So Denis, you said, I didn't know about assigning colors and created new materials for every color. Oh, I forget if you used ProBuilder or not. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to work. There's not a right way or wrong way, especially since we're just doing prototype kind of work anyway. It's just Pro Builder's made to quickly, it's made to really quickly prototype stuff. I don't think anyone would build a game in Pro Builder. I mean, maybe they would, but I don't think so. But I feel like for level designers, it's okay. You do, yeah. I feel like for level designers, it's just really, it's really quick. It's really useful. Um, yeah, there's yeah, the vertex color thing like is kind of it's the way to go, I think. Material editor, I've never used this actually. I think for like what we do, I just never find a use. It's because we're doing stuff really simply. So it wasn't really that important to me personally. Okay, so I'm going to try to kind of go with that crazy image I just showed of the pathway leading through everything. I lost my place again. Oh, how does this? Okay, there we go. All right. I'm just drawing a line with the road really here. Oh, I think that was rotated in a way I did not intend. Okay, that's fine, I guess. Trying to get a nice winding path through here. Maybe I could do kind of a middle ground. And I do tend to move out. You can see I tend to do a lot of my moving around from the player perspective, just so I'm thinking of this as my canvas. This is my framed shot, kind of almost from a movie or whatever, or a photo. And I'm trying to build from the shot, but I do zoom in sometimes when I have to like have a sanity check and see where my geometry is in relation to other geometry. Whoa, sorry about that. Okay. In fact, I think what I'll do here is I'll do a sanity check here. Do like a plateau. Kind of like that. And I'll duplicate. Yeah, yeah, the reason I'm building the paths before the ground plane is just I feel like it's ultimately it's going to be more important where my paths are, right? Like I'm just sort of I'm building the skeleton first, and then I feel like I said, you can have that screenshot of where everything you had all your basic elements arranged in the most important way, and then later you can decide like if you've deviated too much or too little from that. It's almost like again I try to oh yeah, and the terrain tool is cool, but it's much better. How do I put this? It's cool, but it's sort of like if you think about building the way I'm building here, if I put in a terrain tool later, I can use it kind of just to raise and lower things with the height map, just to fill in the gaps. Like now I can fill in the gap around the path I built. You see what I mean? but I'm not getting confused because the terrain's a very complicated, by comparison, it has like a ton of triangles in it. It's very complicated geometry compared to what I'm doing now. And honestly, that's when you have to manage that stuff early on, it just makes your life more difficult, and it can easily kind of overwhelm you and get you confused and get you distracted from what you're trying to do. Maybe I'll just rotate this. Okay, now we're kind of establishing, like, when I put these flat areas, these sort of like resting spots along the path, they can kind of represent maybe like places where I can put, I don't know, like more of the buildings maybe that we had, whoops, sorry, let me grab this image, like more of the buildings that we had, like that were within the walled city. Maybe we can think about like these are places where we can build little settlements or suggestions of them. These sort of flat ground plains here. Okay, let's see. In fact, I'm glad you brought up the terrain tool. Maybe, I don't know, we'll see if we have time. Maybe I can, actually, I probably shouldn't play with it. Honestly, like for a blockout, like a blockout like this, where we're really just, we're not going for a playable space, we're just going for the establishing geometry. It's probably a little much to worry about terrain. That would be something once we want to have it playable. We'd have to go in and refine it, make sure not only does it look good from this perspective, but when you actually get running through it, you know, does it make sense then? Does it make sense like in the moment-to-moment traversal of the space? That's kind of a separate question, really. Yeah, let's see. That's not quite what I wanted, but maybe I'll grab the Citadel now. I could or I could not move it forward. I don't know if it matters. And if I figure this is my road out of the Citadel and I connect it with this long path, I guess it works. Trying to get enough windiness to make this interesting. Okay, that's good enough, I guess. Okay, we end up with that. Then we can, let me see. If we want to build our little side buildings here, we can definitely do it now, I guess. If this sort of represents, this sort of represents where our side buildings are. In fact, I think even from here, I might even, that's a little weird now that I see that. I don't know, I'm probably being too fussy now. Okay, that'll be all right, I guess. I'll just make that really long. It's good enough, I think. Yeah, so this is, again, another sort of ground plane, at least a placeholder ground plane. See if I should raise this a little. I don't want it to compete too much. Just sort of adding in some elements here that might work a little bit. Yeah, I feel like, let's see if I hit play, let's see how this looks now. Yeah, I feel like that's already maybe competing a little. Yeah, probably a little bit too much. In which case, let's see. I think I'm probably being a little too fussy about this. I don't know though. That's good enough, I guess. Yeah, so we have some framing elements on the right, and then maybe we have a little bit over here. Add a little bit of geometry on this side. Maybe, yeah, I think to draw some interesting lines here. I'm trying to think how we can do this. Yeah, we could do something. Maybe a plateaued kind of structure here. Could help draw attention to things. And we could even do some sort of repeated elements maybe that help draw attention this way. Maybe even, let's see if I get really small with this. I don't make this too big. Let's go. Oops, that's not what I want. Let's see. I'll just zoom in to see what I'm doing a little bit here. Just trying to think of a bit of a progression into space, like how these lines here might, they might end up seeming like they might move the eye forward this way. At least that's what I'm hoping. If we create kind of a line going that way with these shapes here, might do what I'm hoping to do. Save my demo so I don't crash here. Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of doing it. Like to me, this here is like leading my eye that way toward the building. Maybe just to make things a little more clear, I can let me take my new Pro Builder buddy. Let's see, do a new shape again. Build it. I guess it builds right next to me, how doesn't it? I think it builds right next to the player camera. Grab my auto grid. Do a vertex color on it. Apply a dark color. Yeah, and I really wish, sometimes I wish this had a very simple, like at my job in Unreal Engine, where we're using Unreal 4, you can just do like an Alt X on the ground plane, and it'll snap the object to wherever you're pointing. So if anybody knows of a shortcut like that for Unity, I would be much obliged. That's a really nice shortcut to have instead of all this that I'm doing right now. I'm trying to draw like a fake door here. That's what I'm trying to do. Just so it's a little more clear in my mind what I'm doing. Okay, I guess that does it. All right, so let's see. I go back to here. Okay, that's better. I can at least see that a little more clearly. Yeah, we could even do. We talked about detail. Like I know this seems like detail here, but to me, like we're creating kind of some guiding lines with a pattern here is what I'm trying to do by having these lines go down like that, creating a line out of these little lines. I think we could do, I mean, if we want, we can do detail on this, more like tiny detail to try to draw attention to this entrance. Detail that might not be just abstract, but actually maybe kind of realistic, like a gate. Or we think a little bit about that. Scale that a little bit more. So yeah, when I'm duplicating this stuff, I'm just Control-D'ing and then dragging over. And the big thing for me, of course, is like, in case you don't do it yourself, like I'm just doing this stuff in local up here, like in local space, really. Just because it makes your life so much easier just to do things like this. So I think a little bit of that extra detail should draw my eye down there. Yeah, it helps a little for sure. I think maybe this shape though could be a little less complicated. A little more like that. Yeah, and actually this line here probably could be angled more to draw attention. Like these lines here are pointing toward this large building. This one should probably do the same to accentuate that, I feel. I feel like that's drawing a better line toward it, definitely. Yeah, and then as far as the rest of the terrain goes, I usually go back to shaded wireframe just because I can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. I'm editing things like this. I do this in Unreal all the time too. I just like seeing my mesh edges. Helps avoid confusion. Yeah, we could do some interesting, like to do more interesting kind of lines. Here we could try, we could do like the original image from Desperados had like a riverbed, so we could play with some water here. That could make things a little more interesting. We want to go that route. We can do that. We'll just help draw a few more lines. Not sure if you'll see this from the player static perspective or not, but maybe it's worth considering anyway. This is where ProBuilder actually, if you wanted to get a little more complicated with your geometry, ProBuilder might actually be more interesting. So yeah, I guess that's kind of interesting. Just trying to think of ways that we can angle this the most to point towards where we want it to point. Okay, I do feel like that's good. These lines are at least going that way. So that's something. We could act like, not sure if this will look crazy or not. We'll see. It actually works okay. This little canal kind of running through here. He helps create like a bit of a line toward the entrance down there. Where it goes from there, I don't really know. It's a little odd, maybe. And as far as like other stuff in the background, let's see. Duplicate this. I'm gonna move some more large slabs around in the background here. Or not in the background, just kind of in the gaps between things. Maybe we do some more sort of progression into space here. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah, I might actually, I don't know, maybe I should raise the Citadel up a little. Oof. Sorry about that. Actually, this is, grab this guy and put him in there. Not sure how that looks. Let's see. Yeah, that's okay. Feeling like my composition's a little bit smushed in a weird way, though. I think it's mainly from the, I think from the perspective of this editor camera back to the player camera, it's like, it's changing a little bit on me. Oh, really? Come on. I'm gonna grab all these guys. I said this before, I think, but I also wish there was a way you could just grab everything and then like right click on all the selected gameplay objects, and then there was an option here that said add to empty. Like, I have no idea why that's not a thing, but it's not. If I squeeze this in a little, I think also to frame it on the other side, I will go right ahead and make a big cube here. Big cubes are our friend. In fact, this might even just be okay if it's like really close to the player. So when we talk about framing, like there's so much noise going on over here, like so much stuff I don't want to even look at. So a quick way to just make sure I don't even look at it would be, would be just to block it out of my sight completely. Just really obnoxiously block it out of my sight. Then later figure out why I can't see it. Like, am I passing by a city wall or something like that? You know, like, I don't know, but maybe we figure out a way of, we figure out a reason for what this is later. We just figure out that it's better to have that blocked off to tighten up our composition. I feel like already that's tightening up our composition by framing here and by framing there. It's helping me focus a little more on what's ahead of me. And then like from this view, I feel like we can now see the progression into space, and we have enough things that are pointing us toward the eventual goal. And even though these might be interesting places to visit, they clearly seem like subordinate to the ultimate goal. If we say to ourselves, like, even though this happens to be traversable, that's not the goal here. Say like, this is a place we can visit, and that's a door into like another dungeon or something like that, you know? And then over here, by the time we get down here, we find that, you know, this is also another explorable structure, that kind of thing. But I feel like, yeah, from the start perspective, we at least see where we want to be eventually. And we can definitely see like the progression into space. And I feel like it pretty much creates our focal point on the Citadel as we want it. That's another thing we'll talk about later also. This will come up a lot. I'm probably going to be bringing up the goals of this assignment a lot in some of the future reviews, because a lot of times as you move through a space, we're going to talk about soon in one of the future assignments, we're going to talk about this concept of a node network. As you move through a space, you might emerge from almost a corridor or a linear path into a space where there's options available to you. We're going to talk a lot about what the focal point is when you enter that node and how you present all the player choices and gameplay opportunities. And the things we're presenting to the player might be different based on the level design intent of the space. If this is an exploration space, it might be presenting us with places to explore, like I said, like whatever this building is, whatever that building is, whatever the Citadel is. If it's a combat space, we might be presenting tactical options to the player, like where can they take cover, where can they begin attacking a group of enemies maybe. This is something that comes up in Uncharted a lot. You'll enter into their spaces and it'll be sort of set up like a combat arena, and you'll see off in the distance, you'll see where the enemy patrols are. You'll see that they're at the points they station themselves. You might even see where snipers are perched, that kind of thing. And then you decide where you want to start engaging them. So that's the kind of thing we think about when we're composing a space like this. We think about what do we want to assign the player. And sometimes it might even help you to do a really simple sketch, even on a cocktail napkin. I don't even know, just like really basic, just sketch out like, okay, what 3 things maybe do I want the player to see, and try to keep it limited to maybe your top 3 things, maybe even 2. I don't know. I mean, aside from your focal element, which will be your ultimate goal. But yeah, try to limit the number of things and try to work really simply like this, just so you can, you don't get overwhelmed by the detail and you always keep your focus on what you need in the level. Yeah, so I hope that was useful to you guys. I'm probably going to end here. I feel like at this point I'll just be like kind of noodling around and adding superfluous detail, but I wanted to try to show you like the basics of how I work before I get into much more detail. And hopefully that can be something you guys can try out as well. So I'm going to check really quickly also. I forgot to check the forums on the website. I'm going to check the live Q&A forums to make sure I didn't miss anyone's questions. It's kind of a low turnout this week. I don't know if there'll be any questions, but let's see. Week 4 and live Q&A. Nope, I don't see any questions. Yeah, so I guess if you guys don't have any other questions, I'm going to sign off for the day. No? Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for showing up, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.